Well, just a typical Sunday night. You know, my son's church, they also meet on Sunday nights, which is rare. Most churches have quit. My son preached 3 times this morning, and they'll have another service tonight. Amen. And they run somewhere between 400 and 600 on Sunday nights. It varies what's going on, but they've continued to do it, which I think is a great thing. If you weren't here this morning, you weren't here this morning, but you're here tonight, would you raise your hand so I can see you? Hold them up high, and you want to give me money, all right? God, y'all laugh about that. I hope my message tonight, tomorrow night, unless God changes my mind, I'm going to answer the most important question that's ever been asked. And Oprah got it wrong. Now, she knows a lot of stuff. Now, if you think Oprah's saved, then you're probably lost. She's New Age. She's made it very clear. She has a deal called the New Earth. It's I'm trying to think what she's a New Age, and so that New Earth teaching is about you're kind of going to be okay. I'm okay. Blah 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 blah, and millions of people have followed her. And I want you to understand that she is lost. You don't want to miss tomorrow night. I'm going to answer the most important question that's ever been asked. It's probably my toughest message that I preach. And I probably get in a little bit of trouble when I preach it, but I'm going to go with it anyway. So I'm going to answer that question tomorrow night. You don't want to miss. I'm not sure what I'm doing Tuesday, but I may figure out it on Monday, and I'll let you know. Turn your Bibles to Genesis chapter 2. Would you go there quickly? Genesis chapter 2. It's right after chapter 1. Just thought I'd help you. Need to get my prop in place. It's a fake tree, but it's good. Everybody say no more excuses. Now, I want you to hear me. This is not a popular message either. If you got a good enough excuse, Pastor, you can do about anything you want to do. You want to murder, you want to hate, you want to be deceived in sexuality. You want to get a divorce. I mean, you want to do drugs. You can do just about anything that you want if you got a good enough. Everybody say no more excuses. It all starts in Genesis. Everything we've done starts in Genesis. Amen. Excuses started there. Sin started there. Disobedience started there. It all started there. And so you have an opportunity tonight to quit making excuses. How many of y'all have ever invited somebody to church and they had an excuse for why they couldn't come? Raise your hand. How many of y'all invited somebody tonight, they had an excuse? Raise your hand. Should have, yeah. How many of y'all, so everybody can raise their hand, sometime in your existence, you've ever invited somebody to church, they had an excuse for not coming? Raise your hand. Are you ready? How many of y'all believe those people were lying? So everybody do this with me. Everybody do this. I love that. This is my favorite method. Do that. Everybody do this. This is the universal sign for liar and loser. So everybody do this. So tomorrow, when you go to work, just walk into your office like this. Now, you got to be careful with this. But when people begin to make excuses, and by the way, most of them are lying. You know they are. They probably could have been here, but if you got a good enough excuse, you can do just about. Everybody say no more excuses. There's a little girl sitting kind of like where you're sitting. She's about 10 years old. She's raising her hand. I'm not calling you, but you're listening. And how old are you? It's all right. She was 10 years old, sitting right there, sitting with her parents. And I said, you know what? Tomorrow, just invite people. By the way, this is a party and a feast, not a funeral. I mean, you're a unique church. I mean, I just prayed with about 30 or 40 men. That never happens. They actually smiled. They're happy. You don't have deacons. We've established that because you can't deek. But you got men that are serving. Amen, brother. So tomorrow, wherever you go, just start inviting them. And when they begin to make, politely do this. Now, this could get you in trouble, so be careful. So this little girl, about this girl's age, decided that she wanted her teacher and her husband to come to church to hear me preach. So she got there before anybody. Walked up to her teacher and said, hey, listen, my parents, we're inviting you. We're going to pick you up, you and your husband. We're going to take you out to eat, and we want you to hear this guy preach. Now, he doesn't look like a preacher, but I think you're going to like it. They were both lost, the teacher and her husband. And the teacher began to make, and the little girl, so she began to walk away, and the teacher said, come here. What does this mean? This is where I come into the picture. Didn't want to, but I did. This little 10-year-old girl said, well, this guy that's preaching at my church said when you make excuses, you're a liar and a loser. Guess who came to church that night? Oh no, the teacher and her husband showed up. They didn't get picked up, but they were looking for me. Now, I'm usually around. I'm usually by my shirts or signing books or doing something. Well, she couldn't find me, so she's sitting with that little girl and her parents, and she's steaming. So I get up. I don't even know about this. So I'm preaching. Guess who got saved that night? The teacher and her husband. And they came up to me. She said, sir, I was going to cuss you out. She said, but I realized that me and my husband have making a lot of excuses. I didn't even preach it. She said, but that little girl there did this, and it got my attention. And that night, because of a 10-year-old little girl, an adult couple gave their life to Christ. I was at another church in Oklahoma. I won't forget it. And it's a big old stage, and I'm getting ready to preach. And it's amazing because I don't want to hear negative stuff before I get to preach, so I try to be careful with all that. But all of a sudden, we're getting ready to start, and this little 5-year-old girl, I see her walk to the altar. She goes, psst. I waved to her. She went. So I walked over, and she went. So I had to go all the way down. I said, yes, ma'am, what can I do for you? She says, Brother Ken, I want you to pray for my daddy. My daddy drinks a lot. She knew, 5, 6 years old, he's an alcoholic. My daddy's mean to my mom, and I want my daddy to get saved. Would you pray for him? And I said, I'll do it. So right there, we prayed. That was like on Monday night. Tuesday night, I'm sitting, psst. So I walked all the way down because I knew I was headed there. She said, my daddy didn't come tonight. She said, I invited him Sunday. I invited him last night. I invited him tonight, but my daddy had a lot of. Would you pray that my daddy comes? I said, I'm going to do it. So Wednesday night comes. So last night, I just met her because I knew she was going to be there. And she looked at me and she said, Brother Ken, my daddy's here. He's been drinking a little bit. Not bad, but my daddy's here. I will never forget this. She looked at me and said, Brother Ken, you better do really good. Now, I've had a lot of pressure. She said, my daddy needs Jesus. So I got up to preach, and I'll never forget. Because you see, if you got a good enough excuse, you can go to hell. You know what I found out? You can excuse yourself to hell, you just can't get out. And I want you to understand that every time you invite somebody and they make that might be their last invitation. It could be over. So I got up and preached, knowing that daddy was there. I didn't want to look to see where he was because I didn't want to, kind of nail on. And all of a sudden, the invitation came. A bunch of people came forward. I won't ever forget it. Meadowwood Baptist Church. And all of a sudden, this little girl stepped out in the aisle with her daddy. They came walking forward. I heard it. She said, Brother Ken, my daddy got saved tonight. And then she said this, you did good. Please listen. Don't stop inviting people to the party. God, in fact, I wish you had a sign out there. In fact, on the corners, you ought to add to that sign, happy hour meets here. Listen, drunks will come. We just not drinking what they're drinking. Everybody say no more excuses. Now, I'm trying to set this up because I don't know if you understand, but do you understand that 911, the reason it happened because there were about 19 men. All they needed was that's all they needed. Do you remember Timothy McVeigh? If you know that name, say I do. I lost some friends that died in that Oklahoma City bombing. 27 children died in that bombing. 69 people. I've gone through that memorial. Do you understand that happened because Timothy McVeigh went to Desert Storm or some war, got mad at America, and decided he would get even, and all he needed was... Now, there's consequences to sin. Guys, if I steal a nickel, I'm probably not going to get in much trouble, but if I steal $5, the consequences are higher. And I want you to understand that Timothy McVeigh, yes, I believe he could be saved. You're not going to like what I'm going to say, but that's okay. You have your right to be wrong. But I think Timothy McVeigh should have died about 69 times. There's consequences to sin. Oh, yes, he could be saved. But if you got it good enough, you can do just about. You want to get a divorce, you want to do drugs, you want to drink, you want to be atheist, you want to be agnostic, you want to be gay. I want you to listen, all you need that's all you need. Psalms 14:1 says, a fool says in their heart, there is no God. Do you know that it takes more faith not to believe in God than it does to believe in God? And do you know that most atheists and agnostics, can I say this to you? You got to hear me. Most of them at one point, Pastor, were believers in a church. And something happened, and all they needed was, that's it. Look at Genesis. And I'm going to give you the three major excuses. Go to Genesis chapter 2. Would you look at verse 15? Now I'm reading from the New Living Translation. Thank you for bearing with me. They may throw some scriptures up there in King James, so you're going to see some similarities. The Lord placed the man in the Garden of Eden to tend and watch over it. But look at verse 16. Look at verse 16. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat. Now keep going. You may freely eat, next verse, but the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. For that day you will eat, you shall surely die. Let me read mine. Mine says this, but the Lord God warned him, you may freely eat the fruit of every tree in the garden, except for the tree of knowledge of good and evil. If you eat its fruit, you're going to die. Everybody say hello. You see my illustration, right? You got it? So you need to understand, Pastor, think about this. They walked through the right trees to get to the wrong one. In fact, Pastor, they only had one wrong choice. They had all, listen, we got more right choices in our life today than we do wrong. And I want you to hear me. You ought to be a little upset at Adam and Eve. Read Romans 5:12. Because of one man, Adam, and his sin, we all were born sinners. Hello? My son was at a Christian school in the 4th grade, 10, 11 years old. One day he came home, walked in through the kitchen, slammed the kitchen door, went over to the refrigerator and got a Coke or something, slammed the refrigerator, went and got a Yoo-Hoo, Winky, Twinkie, I don't know what he got, slammed that deal, slammed his book back, sat in a chair, and I said, Jeremy, before I slam you into next week, what or who are you mad at? I will never get this long as I live, because he got it. He said, Dad, I'm mad at Adam. Adam who? I didn't even know you knew an Adam. He said, Dad, it's the Adam in the Bible. I said, Jeremy, what did the Adam in the Bible do to you today? He said, Dad, you don't get it. I said, obviously I don't get it. He said, Dad, now please listen. Only a 10-year-old boy could come up with this. He said, Dad, do you realize if Adam and Eve have not messed up, that we could go to school naked? Now, I'm not lying. I got a mental picture of a lot of people, and it was not pretty. I said, Jeremy, he said, Dad, wait, there's more. I can't wait. He said, Dad, do you realize nobody would know we were naked? We wouldn't have to have clothes. Dad, it would have saved you money. Dad, you ought to be mad at Adam too. And then he said this, and this is where we stopped. He said, Dad, we could play baseball naked. I said, we're not. We're done. We're done. And you laugh at it, but he got the message. It wasn't a bunch of sins. It was one tree, one choice, one time. And I want you to hear me. The dude that got me, you're going to hear some of my story Wednesday night, but the dude that got me to church, I kept making excuses. And finally, he picked me. He was a football player. I was not very big. He scared me. So he said, dude, you're going to church. And so I went. And I want you to listen, October of 1968, if I would have had one more, I probably wouldn't be here today. So keep reading. Go to chapter 3. Look at verse 1. The serpent, everybody say snake, dragon, say devil, was the shrewdest of the wild animals the Lord God had made. One day he asked the woman, isn't this funny? He didn't go to the man. He was probably playing golf. But he went to the woman. Look at the has God really said you shall not eat from all the trees? Look at this. Did God really say you must not eat fruit from any of the trees in the garden? That's not what he said. Of course we may eat fruit from the trees in the garden, the woman replied. It's only the fruit from the tree that's where? Where? It's in the middle of the garden. You know what the word middle means? It means to be self-centered. And so she had to go through the right trees to get to the wrong one. So watch. It's in the middle of the garden. It's only the fruit of the one in the middle of the garden, verse 3, that we're not allowed to eat. God said you must not eat it or touch it. He didn't say anything about touching. He said if you eat it, you're going to die. Are you ready for this? Do you understand that the devil is telling Adam and Eve that God has held out on you? Please listen. You see, if God loved you so much, why wouldn't he let you have all the trees? By the way, they said an apple doesn't fall too far from a... You want to know why your kids act that? Just look in the mirror. Listen, I've had to really work on my life in some things. But watch, read on, verse 4. I love that the devil's now going to give counsel. You're not going to die. Come on, God, he's joshing you. Look at this. The serpent replied to the woman, God knows your eyes will be open as soon as you eat it, and you will be like God, knowing both good and evil. The woman was convinced, and she saw that the fruit looked good. Now, I don't think it was an apple. I think it was probably a prune that looked like an apple. Hello? And by the way, let's see where Adam was. Looked delicious. She wanted the wisdom it would give her, so she took some of the fruit, and what did she do? But she took a bite. How many bites do you think she took before she gave it? One. I think as soon as she bit into it, she knew. Look, she took this fruit and ate, and then she gave to who? Who was standing right next. The whole conversation. That didn't freak you? If you walked out to the parking lot and a snake crawled up and went, psst, come here. You deserve to get bit. But I want you to hear me. She said to the man, hey, here, take a bite. By the way, they both had a choice. But Adam, please listen, wanted his woman more than he did the worship of God. Watch, this is going to be, when I get to my story, I'm almost there. Everybody say almost. Yeah, it makes you feel better. And so let's see what happened. Read on with me. So at that moment, their eyes were open, verse 7, and they suddenly felt shame and they realized they were. Now, I don't know what that means in Kentucky, but in Texas, it means you ain't got no clothes on. So they went shopping. I wish I could have found some trees. And they began to hide themselves with bushes. Are you ready? But then, read on with me. Read, because I think this is important. Verse 8, the cool of evening breezes were blowing. The man and his wife heard God walking in the garden. So they hid from the Lord among... Hey, Adam. Yeah? You think you can see us? No, we look like a tree. We're dressed like a tree. We're behind a tree. Just put an arm out. He'll think it's a branch. Now, you guys laugh at this, but we don't hide behind trees. We hide behind our excuses. Do you know hell will be full of people because of our excuses? We wouldn't go tell them. I think about that 10-year-old little girl that went to her teacher. I mean, she had no idea but she was determined, she was burdened for that teacher and her husband. Do you understand I hope tonight you get on the phone. I hope tonight that you email, text, Instagram, Snapchat, whatever it is. I hope, listen, there are people that are one choice away from their eternity. One of my shirts says, people make choices and choices make people. So you have to understand that they're hiding from the Lord. So let's read on and see what happened. When the cool evening, they hid from the Lord, and the Lord called to the man Adam, where are you? You think God knew where he was? I don't think God's going, oh my goodness. Watch this. Where are you? And he replied, I heard you walking in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked. Who told you you were naked? The Lord asked. Verse 11, have you eaten from the tree the fruit I commanded you? And the man replied, it was, hello, it was the woman. I think he forgot, Pastor. He wanted the woman. He's in the garden, 2 elephants, 1 Adam. 2 zebras, 1 Adam. He went to sleep. When he woke up, he ain't slept since. There was woman. It was the woman you gave me. Excuses. Oh, keep reading. This gets even better. Then the Lord asked the woman, what have you done? I'm laughing. Only a few of you guys are going to get this. I haven't preached this in a while. Who did she blame? Who? How many of y'all remember a guy by the name of Flip Wilson? Remember his favorite line? The devil made me do it. Can I make this statement to you? The devil can't make you do anything. In fact, this messes up Pentecostals and charismatics. Can I go ahead and tell you this? The devil cannot defeat you. He's already been defeated. But let me tell you what will defeat you. Are you all ready? Your openness to the devil's lies. Your openness, listen, to deception. When you open that door, are you ready? That's what will defeat you. Keep the door closed. Amen. The devil made me do it. Then if you would, look at chapter 4. Adam and Eve had sexual relations with his wife Eve. She became pregnant. She gave birth to Cain because she was able. I just like a few of y'all that got it. With the Lord's help, I produced a man. Later, he gave birth to another one named Abel. When they grew up, now watch this, Abel became a shepherd while Cain cultivated the ground. When it was time for the harvest, Pastor, watch this, Cain gave some of his crops. Hey, God, here's my Brussels sprouts. Hey, God, here's my turnips. Some, but watch this. Look at this. God, Pastor, there's so much stuff right in here. Abel brought a gift, the best of his firstborn lambs from his flock. The Lord accepted Abel and his gift, but he did not accept Cain and his gift. In fact, here comes the excuse. Cain got mad. And then the Bible says that Cain took his brother out in the field and killed him. We went from a tree in the middle of a garden to a bite, to hiding behind a tree, to blaming and making excuses, and now it ended up murder. Please listen. There are people you work with, there are people in your family, there are people I want you to hear me, you go to school with, that are one excuse away from their eternity. Say no more excuses. See, if you got a good enough excuse, you can murder, you can hate. Listen to me. You can get a divorce, you can walk away. My wife and I, divorce has never been, now murder, we've talked about it a couple of times. But they're not divorce. I'm joking. Somebody goes, he would murder? But I want you to hear me. Think of the excuses that people make. Have you ever heard this one? Well, I'm not going to go to church because it's full of. Isn't that funny? You know what I heard a pastor say? You can either go to church with the hypocrites or go to hell with them. Anybody here ever been a hypocrite? Guys, if I tell you to trust God and I don't, I become a hypocrite. I want you to hear me. I love this one. Well, I don't have anything to wear to go to church. What, you go to work naked? Need to talk to my son. See, I want you to listen. The weather, I mean, it's amazing what excuses can do. Now, I'm not even there yet. I'm getting there. And notice, he killed his brother. Remember what God said? He said, hey, Cain, where's your brother? I ain't got a clue. Can I tell you something about Cain? He was the sign of God's wrath, and he was the sign of God's grace. Did you hear me? Because nobody could kill him. He was marked. I mean, he went so far away, but I want you to hear me. God wouldn't let him die, but God gave him the grace and the mercy to live. If you're listening, say yes. Go to Romans. Go to Romans real quickly. This is going to make somebody mad. Go to Romans chapter 1. Go to Romans 1. Now, you know, Pastor, now with all the critical race theory, by the way, Pastor, you need to go listen to Tony Evans. He preached a message for 28 minutes. It's not, and he's a black pastor. I mean, I went to Southern Baptist Convention. I could have listened to him for 3 hours preach. In fact, they shouldn't have let anybody else preach. He should have. But he preached it. My son sent it to me, 28 minutes. He said it's not critical race, it's about kingdom race. Read Ephesians chapter 2. Read it. God, it's about God's kingdom. He cares unity for all of us. It's going to make somebody mad. I'm just giving you a warning. Look at Romans 1. Look at verse 18. Yeah, don't be mad. That's all right. She just praising the Lord. Or yeah, hallelujah to you too. All right. Here it is. Okay, is that a boy or a girl? Because I can't tell. It's a boy, so it's going to be a deacon with a big mouth. All right, here it is. I'm kind of kidding. All right, here we go. I don't care if anybody says that's funny right there. All right. Look at Romans chapter 1, verse 18. But God shows his anger from heaven against all sinful, wicked people who suppress the truth by their wickedness. Look at verse 19. These people know the truth about God because he made it obvious to them. Verse 20. For ever since the world was created, watch this, people have seen the earth and the sky. Through everything God made, they can clearly see his invisible qualities, his eternal power, his divine nature. And Pastor, notice the next line. I don't know what it says. There it is. And they are without what? Look at this. He said this. They have no excuse for not knowing God. You know what that word means, Pastor? There's no defense. Listen, I don't care if you're atheist, agnostic. It don't make me any difference. I've got a friend we've been trying to minister to, and she said when she comes back, she wants to be like a dove or something. I said, you've already come back. You're a donkey. I want you to hear me. He's saying just creation says there's God. The sunset, the sunrise, the stars. And here's what's sad. Not just lost people making excuses, but saved people. I mean, if you need an excuse not to believe, I got it. 9 stepfathers, abused every way he could be abused. I mean, beaten like a dog, left in bars and cars and streets and alleys. Lost a grandson to heaven. It's not a bad loss. It hurts. Tuesday, Harold right here. Harold, raise your hand. Tuesday, his daughter, she was 21 years old, I think, was in a car wreck. And let me tell you, if he had an excuse, hey, God, why my daughter? Hey, God, why my grandson? See, that's what happens when we begin to make excuses. By the way, he's going to grieve on Tuesday. I'm going to grieve again September 1st. I'd love to have, but I'm not going to stop living for Christ. Now, I'm going to tell you a story in a moment. And read on with me. He said they have no excuse. Look at verse 21. Yet they knew God. They wouldn't worship Him as God or even give thanks. And they began to think of foolish ideas of what God was like. As a result, their minds became dark and confused. Somebody's sitting here tonight. You don't want to believe in God. You don't need God. I want you to hear me. It doesn't change the fact God loves you. That fact stays. But look, if you would, I want to show you something in verse 24. 3 times he says this. God abandoned them to do whatever. Let me see what that one says. Therefore, everybody say therefore. You don't even know why therefore is therefore. You just say therefore. You know what? Can I tell you what that word therefore means? It's a main point. Pastor, anytime you see wherefore or therefore, here's what he's saying. Because of everything I said, here's what I want to say. Therefore, God gave them up, abandoned them. That's the first time. Look at this. To uncleanness, to lust of their hearts, to the dishonor of their bodies among themselves. Keep reading. Look at this. As a result, they did vile and degrading acts with each other's bodies. Verse 23. They traded the truth of God for a lie. Look at verse 26. Watch verse 26. For this reason, look at Pastor a second time, God gave them up. Vile passions, for even, here it comes, for even women exchanged natural use for what is, again, listen, women began to be with women, men began, that, he said, I've given them up, but keep reading. Look at verse 28. And even as they did not like to retain God, God gave them over. 3 times, look at this, to a depraved mind. To do things that were not fitting, that were not right. Listen, does God love these people, yes or no? You have to understand, He loves us. In fact, Pastor, we got to be careful because we always said God hates the sin and loves the sinner. That's not necessarily true. If you read Psalms 5, He abhors those who do wicked. That word, He hates those who do evil. But can I give you the flip side? He still loves them. Guys, we just want to kind of, He hates the sin but loves the sinner. Let me tell you, when I mess up, He hates it. And by the way, I do mess up. Call my wife. She's making a list, checking it twice. I'm getting nothing for Christmas. Look at this. And He gave them over to a depraved mind. Let me read mine. To a depraved mind. He abandoned them to do their foolish thinking. Let them do things that should never be done. Look at verse 29. Their lives became full of envy, of wickedness, sin, greed, hate. Pastor, look at this. Murder, quarreling, deception, malicious behavior, gossip. They were backstabbers, haters of God. That sounds like a deacon's meeting. Look. Quarreling. They were backstabbers, haters of God, insolent, proud, boastful. They invent new ways of sinning to disobey their parents. And by the way, when he says disobey his parents, they're not saying, hey, go clean your room. No. When he says disobey, they're going to live in the streets. They're going to do the drug. They're going to exchange the truth of God for a lie. There's no defense. But read on. Look, if you would, at verse 32. They know God's justice requires that those who do these things deserve to die. Yet they do it anyway. Worse yet, watch this, Pastor. They encourage others to do it with them. They hid behind a tree. We hide behind our excuses. Well, why aren't you inviting people? Listen to this. Well, they're probably not going to come. Oh, that's a good way to start. Guys, we got to keep inviting them to the party. Jeff, the football player, invited me night after night. I made excuse after excuse, and I ran out of excuses, and I went and got saved. Go, if you would, to John 15. Go quick. I'm almost to my story. God, it's only 7 o'clock. This is good. Hey, have you learned something? By the way, I'm reading Scripture. That's not what Ken Freeman says. It's what I believe, but it's what the Word says. Truth is not always popular, but truth is always right. I had a young lady come up to me. I'm hesitant about sharing this, but I'm going to do it. And if you're dealing with this, God loves you. She came up to me after a service. She said, Brother Ken, I'm gay. She's like 21 years old. She said, I think I'm saved. And I said, well, ma'am, let me just tell you this. I believe you can be a Christian and be dealing with it. But once that becomes your lifestyle, according to 1 John, which I may preach on Tuesday, can I say this to you? If that's your lifestyle, you make sin a practice or a habit, you've never been born of God, and you don't know God. I said, ma'am, when did you think you were gay? She said, I was 5 years old. I said, ma'am, when I was 5 years old, I was into popsicles. I just tried to lighten it up a little. I said, I love puppy dogs. But I want you to listen to me. How in the world do you know that? People not doing the right thing. Not loving their kids. Not leading the kids the right way. Can I just tell you this? I said, ma'am, God loves you, but you are very, very wrong. By the way, she kept coming back and got saved. She came up to me and she said, Brother Ken, I was kind of mad at you, but then the more you preached and the more I thought about it, my parents have been praying for me. You would think that, can I say this to you? She got changed. She quit making. Look at John 15. Go there quickly. Look, if you would, at John 15, verse 22. Now, you can read all of those verses. If the world hates you in verse 18, remember it hated me first. The world would love you as your own if you belong to it, but you don't belong to this world any more than I do. Verse 20, do you remember what I told you? A slave is not greater than the master. Since they persecuted me, they're going to persecute you. Verse 21, they will, watch this, they will do all this to you because of me, for they've rejected the one who sent me. And look at verse 22. They would not be guilty if I had not come and spoken to them. But now they have no excuse for sin. Please listen. If you got a good enough excuse, you can slap somebody. You ever want to slap somebody? You ever been in line at the store? 15 items or less, cash only. You been in that line? The person in front of you has 34 items because you counted, and they're writing a check that they haven't written in years. You just want to slap them. You ever been at a four-way stop? Of course, you guys shouldn't even have stop signs. You ought to have a sign that just says, slow down, look. Can I get an amen? But you ever been in a four-way stop? Nobody knows what to do. I'm behind this person. There are 3 other stop signs. Nobody is there. And they're doing this. Don't tell me you've not been in your car. Go! Just go! If you're listening, say yes. He says there's no excuse for sin. Guys, you may have an excuse to slap somebody. You may have a reason to hate somebody. But I want you to hear me. It doesn't make it right. 2 wrongs never make A. 2 wrongs have never made A. You're going to hear my story. My dad, my mom, 8 siblings. All of them are screwed up, but a couple of them. But I want you to hear me. October of 1968, I quit making excuses. Are you ready for the message? Did I give you a good appetizer? Go, if you would, to Luke chapter 14. Here it is. 3 major excuses. Listen, I've already driven 2 hours today. And I got another hour going back. Well, maybe 4 hours now. But here's the bottom line. I would drive 2 more hours to preach. I'm not complaining. I love being here. Y'all are weird people. Nobody's leaving. Even the little one here, the deacon, boy, shut up. Just give him that shut up thing. You call it pacifier, I call it shut up thing. Just put it right there. We need some shut up things for some adults. Here, just take that in the bulletin, shut up. Y'all are laughing because you know somebody you'd like to do that. Here. You're trying not to laugh. I know you are, Pastor. He's really trying to be nice. He is. See, I can say stuff you'd love to say. I'm leaving. Go to Luke 14, verse 12. Here it is. And I'm going to tell you what happened the first time I preached this. Luke 14, 12. Then Jesus turned to his host and he said this. When you give a luncheon or a banquet, everybody say party. Everybody knows that word. By the way, just tell everybody about the party this week. Dude, we're having a party. What kind? Oh, you just want to come. Man, drinking and eating. Party. Happy hour meets here. Look here. He said, don't just invite your friends and your brothers, your relatives, your rich neighbors, for they'll invite you back, and that'll be your only reward. But look at verse 13. Look at it. He said in verse 13, but when you give everybody say party, invite the, look at this. He said, when you give a party, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind. You know what he's saying there, Pastor? Pastor, have you knocked on a few doors this week? You know what he's saying? Invite the poor, the lame, those who have been blinded with religion. Invite them. Those who have been blinded with their past, divorce, hate. Those who have been crippled because of abuse. Invite those who are poor, not just in money, they're poor in spirit. Invite those people to the party. Oh, keep reading. Verse 14. Then at the resurrection of the righteous, God will reward you for inviting those who could not repay you. Verse 15. Hearing this, a man sitting at a table with Jesus said, what a blessing it will be to attend a banquet for the kingdom of God. You know what he said? Listen to me. Do you understand that the kingdom of God is going to be a party? Man, I can't wait to get to heaven. And I don't want to be at the back. I want to be on the very front. My grandson Trey, Harold's daughter, we're gonna meet him again. That's our hope. Keep reading. Verse 16. Then Jesus said, let me tell you a story. He was always trying to tell an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. And so he said, let me tell you this story. A man prepared a great feast or a party, and he sent out many what? Many invitations. What does yours say? To say that those who were invited. So he sent out invitations. How many of y'all invited have been praying about who you can invite this week? Raise your hand. I mean, it ought to be every hand in this room. Invite them to the party. Just keep inviting them. My grandson had a Batman and Beyond birthday party when he was 5. He came to my house. My wife lives with me at the house. And he brought her an invitation and me an invitation. He's 5. I said, why? We're both going to come. Why would you give us both an invitation? First of all, here's what, 5 years old. He said, because if you don't get an invitation, you're not going to know where my party is, what time my party is, and if you get an invitation, you got to bring a gift. Are you ready for this? The invitation to heaven is open every day. And how many will walk away tonight with one more excuse? I just don't believe. I just don't need it. God ain't real. I love this one. Why do you believe in God? You never seen him? Somebody said that, and I said, let me ask you a question. Do you believe in George Washington? He said, I do. I said, when's the last time you saw him? He said, I read about him in a book. I read about him in a book. You see, if you got a good enough excuse, you can be atheist, agnostic. You can be whatever you want to be. He said, but they sent out the invitations. Hey, we got at least 3 more nights. You know what I wish you would do tonight? Make a list of people you're going to invite to the party. You know what I wish would happen? About 10 of you call the same person. Yeah. Can you imagine? Dude, I better go. Keep reading. The banquet was ready. He sent out the servant to tell the guest, hey, the party's ready. Look at verse 18. But they all alike began to what? Look what the first one said. By the way, you're going to notice all three times the excuse thing, they started with I. Watch it. I love verse 18. The first one said, I just bought a field. And I bought a piece of ground, and I got to go see it. Everybody do this with me. Everybody do this. Okay, I was born at night, but not last night. Don't you think he should have went to see the field before he bought it? And how do you look at it? Look at that dirt. I could have been to that party, but look at the dirt. See, y'all don't read it like me. And look at what he said. He said, I ask you, I've made the excuse. Write this down. I wrote this in my Bible. This guy was more concerned about his property and his work than he was about the kingdom of God. This guy was more concerned about his property and his work. Man, I got stuff to do. Excuse me. Are you ready? Look at the second one. Second one's even better than the first one. Second guy said, I just bought five pair of what? Anybody know what an oxen is? Somebody tell me, what's an oxen? It's a cow that works. You got lazy cows and cows that work. I love your pastor. We know. So he bought these oxen, and look at what he said. I bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I need to. Everybody do this with me. No, this is a picture of a liar and a loser. Shouldn't he have bought them, tried them out before he? You know what this guy, I wrote it down. This guy was concerned about his possessions and his wealth more than he was the party and the person of Jesus Christ. You think about our church, listen, when sports are getting ready to start, think about it. I mean, you would think our God was round. Little League baseball, soccer, it's amazing, all this stuff that's going on. And isn't it amazing that we make excuses not to go to church so we can go somewhere else? Should we make excuses, and by the way, it wouldn't be a bad thing not to go to that game and come here? I was in Center, Texas. I know it sounds like Center, Texas. On the last night, I was going to do my story. They served 260 pizzas. The auditorium held about 1,200 teenagers. I'd been in the schools. The gymnasium held about 500-600 adults. The cheerleading squad, that night that I was doing my story, they were going to play their rival team in basketball. And the head cheerleader, who was a believer, by the way, there were about 13, 14 cheerleaders, and probably half of those cheerleaders were lost. And so the head cheerleader went to the coach. They had heard me speak that day in the school and said to the coach, Coach, I've told my squad we're not going to go cheer tonight. There's going to be plenty more basketball games. But I've got 8 girls on my team. She's telling her coach, who's probably not a Christian, that I got 8 girls in my squad that I'd love to see saved. They need to hear the rest of his story. They did get disciplined. She said, I'll run whatever laps. And that night, the whole squad came, and all 8 of those girls gave their life to Christ. I was in North Carolina, won't ever forget it. Last night, it's on a Wednesday night. Young lady comes up to me on Wednesday. She said, Brother Kenner, can you go one more night? Can you go through Thursday? We had moved from the auditorium to a gymnasium. It was just unreal. I'd been in schools everywhere. I said, this is the last night. I said, now, I'm not going to say anything to the pastor, but if he were to say something, I might. But I'm not going to say anything to him because I want it to be a God thing. I said, why do you want me to go through Thursday night? And she'd come every night, Pastor. She went to softball practice. By the way, she signed a scholarship to play for North Carolina. She was an incredible softball player. She said and she came in her uniform every night. dirty. My kind of girl. Good looking and could jap slap some guy. That probably offended somebody with that. Are you ready for this? I said, tonight's the last night. I said, I got a plane ticket for tomorrow. So that night, she said, I understand. She said, but my team told me that if you went one more night, because they kept making, she said, my team told me, if you go one more night, the whole squad said they'd come. And I said, it's not my decision. It's up to God. And if the pastor has no idea we had the conversation. So that night we had another 30 or 40 saved. It was powerful. And all of a sudden I'm sitting there getting ready to go back to my table, sign books, do whatever. And pastor turned around and looked at me in front of everybody. He said, Brother Ken, do you think you could go one more night? Now, if I needed an excuse to go home, be with my wife, and I said, Pastor, I said, can I call my wife? I did it right there on the stage. I said, babe, I got about 800 people looking at me, and they want me to go one more night. What do you think? She didn't even bat an eye. She said, I think you ought to stay one more night. That softball girl sitting on the front row just began to weep uncontrollably. I told her, I said, we're going to save the front 2 rows. I don't care what time you get there. And I was going to do my story, which I'll do Wednesday. Sure enough, here comes the whole team. They're in their uniform, practice unit. I mean, you could tell they'd been sliding and everything. 16 of them. She said there was only 2 or 3 Christians on the team. And that night, I want you to listen, the whole squad gave their life to Christ. Can I tell you what happened? Oh, she was pumped. You know what? And by the way, I stayed in touch with her for a while. They started a Bible study. This is a public school. She said every practice they would have a Bible study and prayer. She said, Brother Ken, our team, and they weren't supposed to go very, very far. They went to the state championship playoff in high school softball. Please listen. If I would have made it the excuse to say, hey, you know, I can't go. I was in New Haven, Mississippi. I think that's where it is. I'd spoken all these schools, and these 2 Christian kids came up to me. I couldn't get in all the schools, and principals, some didn't let me in. It was a 9th grade school with about 600-700 students. I won't ever forget it. They kept saying, Brother Ken, what do we need to do? And I said, you need to go to your principal. If your principal will call the pastor or youth pastor. And they said, I'll do it. So they called me on Wednesday morning. No, Thursday morning, because we went one more night. About 6 in the morning, I get a phone call. I wake up and said, hello, who's this? Brother Ken, we got you in. When? This morning. Can you come this morning? And I said, how did you get me in? Well, we told the principal. Now think about that. There's this guy at our church, and he's been talking, and he wants to be in our school. And he'd love to come talk to our students. And I said, so how'd you get me in? About 600-700 9th graders. He said, well, Brother Ken, here's what we're going to do. He's going to let us meet in the alternative school, which is in the basement. And you get to do it at lunch. And you're going to get to do it 3 times, and you get about 17 to 20 minutes all 3 times. That's it. So you're going to make the announcement, there's this guy going to be in the basement of the alternative school, and he's going to talk to you. That's what we got. I hung up. I ain't going. They called me back. Said, Brother Ken, we got disconnected. I said, no, I hung up. I ain't going. I'm tired. Who's going to show up? They said, we don't know, but you're in. I hung up again. They called me back again. Said, Brother Ken, we keep getting disconnected. I said, all right, I'm going. I'm going to show up. I found out about 3 weeks before I got there that a 9th grade boy took his own life. Told one of his best friends. The friends went to a teacher. I have the letter, by the way, that the little boy wrote. Teachers just didn't believe it. They thought it was, and they had never dealt with it. I found that out. So I went. Are you ready? About 600, 700 ninth graders. They're going to be eating while I talk. By the third time, 17. I mean, I had to get done. I talked to over 500 students. Word got out. From the first group, they went to the second group. Word got out to the third group. Are you ready? On the last night, if I would have made an excuse to say I ain't going, and if they would have made excuses, Brother Ken, this is all we got, over 120 students who heard me that day came that night to hear my story. And 60 of them gave their life to Christ because 2 teenagers wouldn't accept my excuse. If you're listening, say yes. Now we're close to being done. Watch. Read on with me. The third one said, look at the third one. Would you look at verse 20? Look at the third one. Are y'all looking? Go ahead and read that. Look at it. Are y'all looking? Third one said, I just got married. I was heading to Victoria's Secrets. Are you ready? I just got married. You see, the first guy said my property and my work is more important. The second one said my possessions and wealth. But listen to what the third one said. He said, people and my woman is more important than the party and person of Jesus Christ. My son, when he was about 16, fell in love. Well, maybe he fell in lust. He came to me, and we have a rule. If you're going to date, you got to go meet her parents and let them know that you're a Christian. This is when they had that True Love Waits deal, and he had a little card that he carried. And I said, then we're going to meet her, and we're going to figure out if. So he went and met her parents. I'm sharing this on purpose because do you understand that Adam gave up his fellowship with God for a moment for a woman? You think about Judas, walked with Jesus Christ. His excuse was, man, I can get power, I can have popularity. And what did it get him? Hung himself. So my son said, Dad, I'm bringing her over. I said, what's her name? He said, Dad, she's hot. That's all I heard. I said, what is hot's name? Dad, I just can't. Dad, she's hot. I said, all right, bring hot over. So he comes in and I greet her and I go back to get my wife so we can meet hot. My wife looked at me and said, well, tell me about her. I said, babe, she's hot. Now, babe, she's not as hot as you, but she's hot. I was thinking. So we sat down. Anybody want to guess the first question I may have asked this young lady? I didn't ask if she was Christian because that'd be too easy. But I can find out. I said, young lady, where do you go to church? That's how you find out. She said, I'm a Mormon. I said, how Mormon are you? My son's eyes got that big. He had not a clue. She said, well, I'm pretty Mormon. I said, will you wait here with my wife for a moment? Jeremy, let's go talk. I said, now, Jeremy, do you want me to take her home or do you want to take her home? But you're not dating her. She's lost. Light and dark have nothing in common. I said, now you can be her friend, but you ain't dating her. Hey, I just got married. And look at what this guy said. He didn't even say, excuse me. He said, I can't come. Could he have brought his wife? The other guy could have brought his oxen. The other guy could have brought some dirt in a jar. Are you ready? This is sad. Read on. After the servant in verse 22, well, let me go back, verse 21. The servant returned and told his master what they had said. And the master was furious and said, go quickly. Go to the streets, go to the alleys, go to the town, invite the poor, the crippled, the blind, the lame. Verse 22, Pastor, this is unreal right here. And after the servant had done this, he reported, there's still room for more. Amen. Can I tell you the saddest sight in this auditorium? Empty seats. No, I think this is a great crowd. Tori and they go to First Baptist Princeton. They don't even meet on Sunday night. You guys are way ahead. But there are great days ahead. But if we need to be an example, not an excuse. On the cross, Jesus could have said, hey, I ain't doing this. But he was our example. Keep reading. There's still room for more. Look at verse 23. So the master said, go to Chief Cornerstone Baptist Church. It's behind the hedges. Do you see this? Guys, I don't know how many people go by your church, but they got to maybe go out of their way to do it. He said, watch this, go to the country lanes and behind the hedges and urge, some version says, make them come so that my house will be full. Now, before I read that last verse, go ahead and make your way up to play. See, now when he starts playing, everybody's going, don't close your Bible because I've read the last verse. There are some of you here tonight. This is your invitation to salvation. And if I promise you, probably 3 or 4 or 5 people this morning walked away lost because they had, well, it's embarrassing. What's everybody going to think? I was in a little town in Arkansas. I'll think about it in a minute. Small town in Gentry, Arkansas. Church was much bigger than this. We had packed it out. And I noticed this man, pastor, to my right, and he had a little boy in his hands, his arms. I thought he was probably 7 or 8. He was 12. His dad would carry him. He came every night. It rained a couple nights, but he came. One of the first ones there. Little boy was drooling a little bit, and he loved the music. You could hear him kind of humming. And I said, sir, could I use you for an example? Now, y'all bear with me, okay? I said, sir, can I use you for an example? I said, is that your son? He said, oh, yeah. I said, how old is he? I think he said he's 11 maybe. I said, are there any 11-year-old boys? And this boy jumped up. I said, hey, dude, run up here. And he ran up. I said, where's your dad? Oh, my dad's right back there. I said, here's what I want you to do. You're 11 years old, just like this little boy over here. I want you to run all over this building. Just run. And then when you finish, I want you to run to your daddy and jump in his arms. And he did. Now I always look to be real. Everybody knew where I was going. I said, sir, can I ask you a question? Are you kind of mad that your son's never going to run like that? I mean, your son doesn't even know your name. Your son can't even talk. Now, I'm crying during this, by the way, Harold. I'm weeping. And that man looked at me and said, sir, God gave me this little boy. This little boy may not know my name, but here's what he does know. His daddy loves him just like he is. And then you know what he said? He said, Brother Ken, he may never run here, but I got great news. We're going to have a sack race when we get to heaven. Did he have an excuse not to believe? Why my 7-year-old grandson on the 11th floor in Dallas Children's Medical Center Hospital? Why mine? Why? See, if you're looking for an excuse, they're all around. Look at verse 24. None of those who were first invited will ever taste of this party. You know what he's saying? No more invitations. That's it. Who will you invite this week to the party? I preached this for a purpose. How many of y'all needed this word? Raise your hands. I just want to see. How many of y'all can relate to this? How many of y'all have made excuses not to go to church? I've heard them all. Well, my kid has a runny nose. You know what? Get a syringe. Suck the snot out. This is one of my favorite ones. Well, you know, some of those kids are... Isn't it amazing? We make them go to school. We make them do this. But we look for excuses. And can I tell you, by the way, I'm encouraged with the crowd tonight. But can I say this to you? This place could be absolutely filled. And we could see 200 people come to Christ this week. We could. I say, I think big. And by the way, your pastor, I'm not just saying this because he's having me again, but he's a keeper, isn't he? Do you think he loves seeing people saved? You think he loves people? Man, he goes around and he's one of the last ones to leave, one of the first ones here probably. If we could bottle up what's in him and give it to other pastors, oh my goodness. You see, if you got a good enough excuse, you don't have to believe. You don't have to love. You don't have to tithe. You don't have to give. All you need is an excuse. Would you bow your heads? Every head bowed, every eye closed. Invitation shouldn't be long.